Welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on the second episode of my story, we'll talk about maybe the second 10 years of my life, maybe from ages 10 to 20-ish, possibly, because there's a period there that covers my naval experience, which I think might be an episode all on its own because it was super impactful in a way. So, changed my life for about 30 years. Anywho, it is November 13th, 2024. My daughter, Sophie, turns 11 today, and she's off to school. To do that, I am recording while Buck's asleep, as I didn't record last night, because I am having some conundrum here on what I'm going to do with this podcast in terms of as it relates to the Men of the House podcast, the concept, because I am in the business or in the process of starting an accountability coaching business. And in thinking up a name for that and potentially having a podcast that's related, I am having issues nailing down a name. But essentially, whatever it is, more than likely, the podcast, I will then offer up, probably be interviewing people who've made some sort of transformation, how they did it, and how they remained accountable to do it. Because making that transformation comes through making change. If transformation is kind of an inside job, but making change is more a process job. You change your processes, which leads to transformation. At least it did for me. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm considering at the moment. And so I may finish out this podcast with Caregiving Chronicles and telling my story, and then move on over to that because it is Q4. It's the last quarter of the fiscal year, which I'm running quarters the same as calendar years, as some budgets start in July. They can start kind of any quarter, but it's up to each company how they do it. But anywho, that's what I'm considering. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. Part of me is like, well, what's the point? Part of it's in my identity. Now I just podcast. So after a night of sleep, I woke up this morning and decided, let's go ahead and record. Yeah, feels more natural. So anyway, going into the second 10 years, I think I probably left off somewhere in the fifth grade. It's one of my favorite years. That's what I tell my daughter. I remember Miss Stripling. I think I told you guys I think she was a hippie because her and her husband took a VW bus up to the California Redwoods, drove through there, brought back some picture slides, and it was also one of my favorite years just because that's the year we studied the solar system and different things like that. And um, yeah, there's something magical about that time when you're a kid and making clay models and learning about space. Because I think the year before was when the Challenger blew up, which we watched in class. That was kind of a big deal. Um, yeah, I think I was still playing Little League football, had not gotten my black belt yet. It's probably a blue belt where I think I won first in regionals, going back to my Taekwondo career. But yeah, I got my black belt, I think, when I was 12. So I had been a blue and red belt during this year. I was still playing Little League. We hadn't started uh, junior high football yet. So I hadn't graduated onto that. So yeah, Little League it still was. And this was also a time, I think, where what else was going on? I'm sure I was still taking martial arts, still playing Little League football. We started band where I played the cornet, the one that looks like a trumpet. Yeah, I wanted to play saxophone, but ended up with cornet. Wasn't super stoked about that, but John Huddleston and I, at least I had a partner in crime. We could compete for last chair. He probably remembers, I think it was Benji Cook. We were selling those little chocolate bars they do for fundraising. And he's like, I'm going to sell all these chocolates if I got to go to Timbuktu. Remember me and John used to, little dirty Johnny, little dirty Juan, Sucio Juanito. We used to always make fun of that. Fun times. Yeah, there was that, and there was something else during that time period. Oh, skateboarding. Pretty sure we were skateboarding. This was the time of Bones Brigade, Power Peralta, uh, Dogtown and Z Boys, the original. But we used to go to the school and skate during the summer. And one of the cool things was, with my dad being in construction and being able to read plans, um, you could buy these little plans, maybe through Thrasher magazine, on how to build a half pipe. And so my dad, with his own construction company, he built a half pipe because I grew up on 12 acres. So very secluded, and the roads were blacktop roads, weren't great for street skating. Hence, we had to go to the school. Um, but yeah, he built a half pipe, and I can remember trying to drop in, how scary it was, and probably stood up there so long, I think I stepped over the nose the first time and ate shit. Yeah. Eventually got it. It was an 8 foot. People used to come out and skate all the time, and eventually it got cut down to a mini ramp, which was also fun, maybe 5 feet. But yeah, good times right there. And then, kind of comes seventh grade, and it's time to leave Little League and move on to junior high football. Well, the interesting thing about junior high is, 12, 13, these are those years that seem like everybody started growing with the exception of me. And to put it into perspective, when I was a freshman in high school, I was 90 pounds and 4'11. So I didn't grow much. So during these years, I think I started off playing football in junior high. And, I was a little ahead of the curve, but along with some people, because there were some other little league players in there. But because I'd played for years, but eventually that really wouldn't matter. It wasn't getting ahead because I didn't grow any. So I remained small and everybody grew and became faster and could hit harder and everything. And I can remember both seventh and eighth grade playing somewhat, but getting injured before I eventually quit. Um, when I was in Little League, my last year there, I remember I got speared in the back, and that gave me like some back issues. And then I think in seventh grade, um, I had my helmet down and not my face mask up, and kind of impacted my spine, hitting someone, which jacked my back. And then another time there was, when I speak of others getting bigger and me staying the same, Jonathan Reese, who was the running back, fullback, he was just like a monster in junior high. And I remember hitting him, and he run me over and then stepped on my back. And that was kind of the last injury before I was like, mm, this is not doing me any good. I keep getting injured. I keep getting put up. It's probably time to quit this. And so I did. And I had gotten my black belt. And, that's where I would say, pretty solid. My instructor talked to me about potentially going to the Olympics when I was 16. And so at this time I was 13. But I'd been doing it so long, and it became kind of more of a dream of my dad than me. And so eventually I gave that up too. Um, you know, never necessarily had any doubts about my abilities to do something. For me, it's always a matter of, do I want to do it? Is it going to be worth it? Am I going to get something out of it? And so this is a pattern that's remained true throughout my life. Maybe why I've done some things and not other things. But my thing is like when football was no longer serving me, I was getting hurt, it wasn't worth it. When martial arts, when I no longer felt the passion of my dad, had more passion than me, then it was no longer for me. But as a parent, I can understand being excited that your kid is good enough to go to the Olympics, potentially. And you want to encourage that. You want more for your children than they want sometimes. That was a point of contention for my dad and I all the time, was because I was smart enough to do about anything I wanted. It was always like, well, you can do this, you could do this, you could do that, and you should, because it would solve kind of like, people who grew up with not a lot of money. I mean, we did okay, but, my dad grew up poor, my mom grew up kind of poor, like to a single working family household, double it sometimes, but, you want your offspring to do better and not have the same problems. So I get it. But for me, it was like, just because one can doesn't mean one should. Just because I could be a lawyer or a doctor doesn't mean that I should be. So yeah, I remember giving all that up. And freshman year, like I said, 4'11", 90 pounds, football was too much. I decided I would play tennis. Um, it was enjoyable. My first doubles partner was Andrew, who designed the logo behind me. Um, he was definitely way better than me because he ended up moving on to singles and then going to state, I want to say. So yeah, he kind of propelled forward. I kind of stayed behind. I had a few doubles partners throughout the years. And by my junior year, I had double partners with Steven Machek. I think he's now an orthodontist. But yeah, tennis it was all right. It was kind of fun, kind of hell on the rotator cuffs. I think I played golf once. It was either choose between golf or tennis. I think I did golf once, but probably because Andrew was doing tennis, I'm sure that's why I did it. Because we were skate buddies and all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, but outside of that, you see, going into high school, what was that like? Um, Maybe kind of exciting, kind of perhaps boring. The way they had the schedule set up, I think probably by freshman, I was already considering leaving high school early. I want to say, because the way the program was designed out was like, typically your last year, you're only taking English one and two, and then government and economics. So four classes over 2 semesters, and then the rest are electives. I was pretty sure that I wanted to go into the military. I knew that. But there was always this thing of, did I want to be enlisted or an officer? And my dad was really pushing for college, but I didn't really like school. But I did well. But I can remember they had this program at the University of North Texas in Denton where you took a test, and then if you got in, you could do your first 2 years of college, last 2 years of high school concurrently, and then graduate, which would have been 15. But I did not score high enough on that test. Then came around my junior year, and we did some research, and I was kind of the one that started it, and 3 other people did it with me. But it was essentially you go to the local junior college over the summer. Summer one, you take your English one and government. Summer two, you take your English two and economics. Take your transcripts to the high school, and they issue a diploma. So that's what I did. Graduated at 16, or roughly, yeah, 16, 17. I think I turned 17 over the summer. I was on my way at 16. But yeah, we had some people I was a little jealous of that they were able to do like the National Guard program where the junior year summer they went to boot camp and came back for their senior year. I thought that was pretty cool because, it was something I would have been interested in, but my parents were not willing to sign because it wouldn't be for an officer, for one. Two, having grown up with asthma, I've told you that in spite of playing football, martial arts, all that stuff, showing myself to be physically capable, other than being small, was that I was always told what I couldn't do. And it's like, you'll never make it. You can never be, you grew up with asthma, you'll never get in. And then, of course, there's this, you know, you could not tell them. Then they always have that moment of truth, like, you know, you don't want to lie. Did you lie about anything on your whatever? Most people are probably lying about felonies or this or that, the other, but for me, it was more the health piece. Um, yeah, I was a little jealous of that and wish I could have done something like that. But the thing was, I really didn't want to go in the Army. I pretty much knew I wanted to go in the Navy. Yeah, I was almost certain. Maybe the Marine Corps, just still Department of the Navy. But I'm pretty positive I didn't want anything to do with the Air Force or the Army. Yeah, other notable things. I can remember taking art as a freshman, which is why I always say it's so important that my daughter has been in art school since kindergarten. Because I didn't get to take my first art class till I was 14. It was basic arts. So that was a notable moment. Other notable moments were, I had a couple friends who took a little bit of a different path and, ended up getting in some trouble. But I can remember them asking me, like, if I wanted to partake in whatever these activities were. And I was like, no, I don't want to. Because I always knew that I was going to go into the military and can be in trouble. I knew because my parents were pushing the college thing, or at least my dad was college. I was going to try to go to the Naval Academy. I wanted to get in there. Um, yeah, so I knew I couldn't get in any trouble, even though I knew I didn't want to go to college. And it was interesting because my mom's like, well, I'd prefer you go to local college, TJC, and just stay home and join the reserves. I wanted to get out because this was a town of 400 to 800 people, very small town. I knew there was more out there. And so we kind of had different plans. But yeah, I knew I couldn't get in any trouble. So I was, God bless them because they were cool about it and didn't try to pressure me. They just kind of let me do my own thing. Um, yeah, they eventually got in trouble and had to do some community service and different things for that, for some of those activities. But yeah, my parents and I, one thing I've always been able to talk to them because I know it was during that time. I remember telling them on the way to a trip one time that, you know, hey, they're kind of going down this road or asked me to participate, and I told them no. And yeah, I was at least able to be open and honest with them. But my why was strong. I knew that if I were going to get in the Naval Academy or anything like that, that having something like that on my record would um, remove a lot of those chances. But interestingly enough, I didn't get to skate out free. When I was 17, I do not remember if I graduated or not, but my parents went to Vegas and left me with my Uncle Leroy. And, he's a beer drinker. I was 16. So me and my cousin and my uncle, I drove him to the beer store to get beer in my single cab truck, lowrider. And, you think it's being responsible. He can't drive because he's drinking. But he gets you have to go across the county lines, across this bridge, and um, we deliver him. Driving back across the bridge, we get pulled over by Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, TABC. Some big pork chop wearing fat ass cowboy with those wool style brush popping jeans. He's like, I was watching y'all from across the street with binoculars, and your minor's in possession of alcohol. And it's like, hey, I'm just driving. Like, he's the one, you know, we just drove him to the beer store. And he's like, well, if it's within our, my uncle did have an open container. He's like, well, if it's within arm's reach, it's considered in possession. And you're the driver responsible for everything in the vehicle. And he'd bought a bottle and he had it like in the floor, and the fathead was like, why didn't you put it in the back of the truck? It's like, really, you can't put a glass bottle in the bed of a truck, it'll break. Anywho, they took my uncle to jail, and he's like, hey, go get some money from my top drawer and come bail me out. This was my first time ever doing this. But three Latinos and a lowrider. Yeah, they're gonna pull you over. This is the early 90s, 92, maybe 93. And they think you're drug dealers because I had a system, a lowrider. My uncle was wearing a fanny pack. And then, of course, we go get like $500 cash and go bail them out cash. I'm sure they really thought we were drug dealers after that. Yeah, that was my first time learning about how to bail someone out. Just taking a wad of cash to the jail and being, and I visited my uncle in this jail before. Uh, we are full of addicts and outlaws. And he was a fugitive at one point in my life. But yeah, you take a wad of cash up there and you're like, hey, I want to bail my uncle out. And they're like, oh, you got to call a bondsman. Like, pick one of those numbers over there. And they'll tell you how. So yeah, I'm sure that didn't help the way the case looked. But then me and my cousin had to go to teen court where you have like a judge, but you have kid lawyers and stuff like that. And I got, you know, ignorance of the law is no excuse, and 25 hours community service where I had to work at the local library. And some of it was fun, but then they had this stored shit full of cans that weren't crushed, and you would have to take all the cans out, crush them by foot, put them back in the bag. So, yeah, that's it's quite the learning experience. I think it goes away, and I don't know if I still have to claim it or was supposed to, but yeah, I did my time for that. That was shitty. But yeah, I never got that nomination. I did get accepted to the Naval Academy. I think I had some other scholarships, like a $40,000 Distinguished Minority Scholarship from Michigan State that was available to me. But I graduated a year early. I was still 17, and I wanted to go into the military, but that was not going to be allowed. My parents were not going to sign for me because my dad wanted me to go to college. Um, and so I ended up at Texas A&M in the Corps Cadets for a semester. Yeah, um, it was all right. Sing Gladiator G, Gallant, Bold, and Free. Um, yeah, you know the thing there. I got made fun of a lot because it was like I got called Dookie Howser. But then it's where like my mouth and doing stupid things and listening to others has always got me in trouble. Like I remember one time they came in, I was shining my shoes, getting stuff ready for the next day, and they're like, "Why aren't you studying?" I guess we were supposed to have mandatory study from like 7 to 10, and I was doing other stuff. And I'm like, "Well, I'm done." No, you're done when we say you're done. Well, I'm the one that graduated a year early, and I'm done with my homework, so I think I know when I'm done. But yeah, so upperclassmen don't look too fondly upon that kind of stuff. Neither do the hot-headed sophomores that were just fish the year before. Yeah, I can just remember being tired as fuck the whole time. The eating was not great because you don't get long. You have to spit out your food when they tell you and consolidate a bunch of crazy rules. But yeah, I did that for a little while and decided like, uh, yeah, I don't know. I didn't like the school part. It wasn't the military part, it was the school part. Just wasn't ready. I was busting at the seams to get out and not be studying more, but be doing something, be seeing the world. Because growing up in a small town, you're like, there's so much more out there. You know, you hear it in music because this is the 90s. You got Dre, Snoop Dogg, Cypress Hill, Pearl Jam. Oh, yeah, I got to see Pearl Jam. Their second album at Stephen F. Austin in the auditorium. Great show. Even got a signed CD by them. Um, yeah, that was a time of some of your favorite things were coming out of bigger areas, and you had that dream, that high school dream of whether it was, music, this or that, the other. Yeah, because I did time at Texas A&M, decided no, that wasn't what I wanted, and then my cousin, the one who also got the minor in possession with me, he lived in Dallas and he was going to the Art Institute for music and video production. And I enrolled in that program and lived up there and did that also a little bit before I joined the Navy. And then for whatever reason, it was like, because I think I'd signed in delayed entry and did all this, and then was like, I think my parents were kind of wanting me to stay back and not go in because the only way I did get them to sign was if I joined the Navy nuclear program because you're supposed to get like 60 hours of college and you'd have a job when you got out and all that shit. That was the only way, and I didn't really want to. Um, but I think I joined the delayed entry program like in October, November, because I left in March, and I think it was like, well, you can try this. I think my parents wanted me to stay home versus really go in the Navy. Try this music production thing if that's what you want to do. And yeah, because they were wanting me to stick around. But there was something, even being in Dallas wasn't, I don't know, that time came up, and I feel like my dad told me, well, if you don't go, you'll never know. It'll always be a what if. Because I could always come back to the Art Institute. But when was I going to take this chance to get out? Because I'd already been to MEPS and lied about my asthma and gotten past the door. So, like, well, if you don't go, you'll never know. Because I could always go back to the Art Institute. So it's like, fuck it. Let's take the chance. Let's see if I can do it. But it wouldn't be met without resistance. So that's what I decided to do. So graduated a year early, went to Texas A&M for a bit in the Corps, decided I didn't want to do that. Joined the Navy Nuclear Engineering Program on delayed entry, right out the Art Institute because it was in quarters, not semesters. And then when the time came, I just said, screw it. I'm going to do this Navy thing and get out of here and get away. Because I feel like every young man, I don't think, you know, there was this idea of what I wanted for my life and then this idea of what my parents wanted. So there was odds and probably partially my reason to get away because I felt like I would be more independent. Like any young person, you want to do what you want to do, and you'll see this theme as it continues throughout the story. But at 48, I'm just now finally learning to go out and be who I want to be. So until next time, you guys go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Asteroid of fear.